Hi. Okay, so I worked with a student who came to the United States in 2007 from Puerto Rico. He received English instruction in Puerto Rico, and he also had formal schooling in Puerto Rico. Um, as far as the services he's gotten here, he really did not get a whole lot for the first 2 years that he's been here. It was really interesting working with him. He received in ninth grade push-in ESL services, and it was kind of a co-teaching situation. And actually, this year is the first year he actually received pull-out direct English instruction in communication arts. So the first assessment that I did with him was the writing. They're kind of in a little opposite order here. The writing that I did with him, you can see, even though it's a little blurry, he did have formal schooling. He was able to do some form of punctuations. Sometimes he would forget to make things plural. He also did it in his English writing also. But you can see in his native language of Spanish, he did use commas to separate things at some times. My other writing sample was a few questions that I asked him. The first one was that describe the job of a doctor, and I was hoping that he would give me some kind of CALPS language, but I did not get a lot. He kept his answers very simple. You know, describe a typical school day from when you get up in the morning until you go to bed. Very simple. He did use a lot of commas. You know, when I woke up, or I wake up, I take a shower, comma, brush my teeth, and eat breakfast, period. Again, he did not do plural things sometimes. I have fun with friend, comma, learn, comma, get good grades. And the last thing I did for that was I gave him 4 words to make a sentence out of just to see if he could do it. And he did. I gave him rivers, mountains, Mexico, animals, and he did make the sentence, if I go to Mexico, I would see a lot of mountains and rivers and animals running around and drinking water. So those are my writing assessments. My listening assessment was, I did 2 of them. The first one I did was a phone reservation, like he was, I'm sorry, these are really blurry. He was calling a restaurant, or somebody was calling a restaurant, and I read the phone conversation to him, and I had given him 6 questions with multiple choice answers to see if he could understand, you know, what I was saying to him. And the biggest thing that he had trouble with was the name of the restaurant for some reason. I don't know why. It's named Apple Tree Restaurant. And I repeated the recording to him, or I spoke to him a couple times, repeated the conversation with the people on the phone, and he still did not get Apple Tree. But he got the last name and the question said, how do you spell Levins? And the conversation actually spells it for him. And at the end, when he was asked to repeat it, he was able to do that, but he was really stuck on the Apple Tree Restaurant part. The second one that I gave him was just a simple follow directions, and it's right here. You can see it's more practical than anything to see if he's able to follow above, below, left, right, next to kind of things. He understood most of the commands that I gave him. It started off, draw the picture. It was draw a circle in the middle of the page and place an X above the circle. The thing that he did get stuck on was vertical lines, and I think he actually cheated a bit because I had him in one of my classes, and it got a little loud, and I turned my head because he really struggled on vertical, and when I turned back, he had the 4 lines written there, and I actually had to repeat the directions 3 times so that he could see if he got it right or not, and all 3 times he had a really hard time with the word vertical. So again, you can see the CALPS language and the BICS language. He really struggles with the more academic language. So that was my listening assessment. Oops, we'll come back to this one. And for my speaking, I did not get a whole lot in for speaking. He was very, very stressed when it comes to speaking English. So I only asked him a few questions. I asked him what's his favorite thing to do, and he said play. He is 16, to watch movies and wash cars. I tried to get him to talk more. He would just look at me and smile and kind of shake his head no, like he didn't want to say any more in English. And I would encourage him, because I do speak Spanish, and I would encourage him in Spanish, to try and get him to speak English and tell him how well he speaks. And I asked him if he liked books, and I got the simple answer of no, and so I had to prompt him some more, and I said, why not? And he said, because he doesn't like to read. And again, just shook his head and didn't really want to continue on. The last question I asked him was, tell me about your family. And he did tell me about, his 2 brothers and his sister, and there's twins in his family. And, but he stuck to the very conversational language, not a lot of academic language in there at all. I didn't want to push him too much, because he really had a rough time giving me the answers in English, because he really, truly does not like to speak English, which I think he does a great job. But okay, so for a reading assessment, I actually threw one of my papers away, because I didn't throw it away, actually. I graded it and gave it back to him, and I forgot I needed it for this part of the class. But one of the first things I did was I did a word bank assessment, and it was just to kind of, his answers either had to be right or wrong. The purpose was more to complete a passage rather than paying attention to the forms of the sentence. So we were talking about rainforests in our world cultures class, and I put some academic language in here just to see how he would do. And he did have trouble with some of it, but he did pretty well. But he did have a little bit of trouble with the word cattle. Actually, he did well. I had rainforests and animals, and he really struggled with the word cattle. Again, not your basic conversational word, so he had trouble. Next thing I did was capitalization mistakes, and this one was pretty interesting to look at, because he would capitalize things in the middle of a sentence. I had my brother really, capital R, I don't know if you can see that, capital R, it's blurry, likes basketball, and he did not circle the capital R to say that should not be, because I said to circle the mistakes, and he actually circled the B for basketball to make it capital. But yet he knew to make the M of Mexico capital, the O in Orinoco River, he knew to make that capital, and the S in South America, and the S in Spanish. But then other things like am, the word am, he circled the A to make that capital. So it seems like he understood some, but then not others. The other thing that I did throw away that I graded him on were questions from a passage from the textbook. I got him to read that, and I gave them questions to answer about the passage. Excuse me. He could do the questions only if he identified the words that were in the question with the words in the passage. And he copied the answers directly from the textbook. If he was asked to summarize what he read, he had a really hard time. A lot of it was really difficult academic language. I had a really hard time with that. So he does well in school, and I'm not sure how he does so well, because he has a really hard time understanding assignments that are given to him. The next thing, hold on for 1 second.